Whoa, man. We want to rehearse it a couple more times?
No, we're good.
Are you sure?
Absolutely not.
We don't like it when you get it first take. It makes the rest of us look bad.
Oh, well. Doesn't happen
doesn't.
often.
Okay,
Beat you to it.
Well, I was going to say that. I was going to say that it's not hard to do. I was going to make a completely different joke, but I like yours better because it insults you, not me.
Uh-huh.
This is the AT Banter podcast, a balanced and entertaining look at assistive technology, accessibility, and its importance in people's lives. Join Rob Minot, Ryan Fleury, and Steve Barclay as they banter with people around the world about anything and everything regarding assistive technology and the disability community. Now, on with the show.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of AT Banter.
Banter.
Oh, only one banter today.
I got attitude today. Banter. Live with it.
Adolescent banter. My name is Rob Minot. Joining me today, Mr. Ryan Fleury.
I'm cranky today.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that.
Thank you, Microsoft.
We'll get to that. And Steve Barclay.
Banter.
Yeah, well, I'd ask how your Monday's going, but
Crappy.
both of you guys not doing well.
No, mine's all right. Mine's okay.
Yeah, Captain Format over there. I mean, what do you... So you want to tell people what you did?
Oh, it's a long story, but
tell them.
My hard drive is a terabyte hard drive, and it was about 400 gigabytes of data that I could not find anywhere on my system where that 400 gigabytes was coming from. I had nothing on there. Everything's on my external drive.
Porn.
No porn either. So I actually removed all my OneDrive files, thinking, well, maybe they synced to my computer somewhere to a hidden folder. And when I did that, the data jumped to 700 gigabytes of my hard drive being used. I went, this, and I went into Microsoft Windows, and I said, format, erase everything, start again.
Okay, let's put that on pause for a second.
Yeah,
so now keep in mind, everybody, he's doing this at 7 a.m. on the podcast recording day.
I have to give a shout out though to Microsoft Seeing AI, because without that reading my screen, I wouldn't have known the progress.
Right. Okay.
So anybody else just thinking, gee, did you empty your recycle bin?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Actually,
did
I
all
would
that.
do that.
Temp files, disk cleanup, recycle bin, didn't do squat.
I mean, what goes through my head immediately is just like, this sounds like,
Ryan of old?
well, but it just
It sounds a lot like Ryan of old.
It sounds like a weekend
Thanks for calling Rob this time.
It sounds like a weekend project.
You had a
or
demo this morning.
a project for maybe on a day where you don't need the computer to record a podcast.
I
but
thought
that's
of that.
just me. But
I thought of that, but it's like, it was just, I had the glimmer in my eye and I had to do it.
Yeah,
I couldn't
I know.
fight the urge.
Yeah, I know.
Had to do it. But I had a backup just in case.
Uh-huh.
We did. We had a backup system ready to go.
So anyways, tell the fine people what happened after that. So you reformatted thinking
So
what? That it was going to take like an hour?
I figured probably 2, maybe 3.
Uh-huh.
And here it is, almost 2:30 Pacific time, and we still don't have keyboards working. So we're not done yet.
Right. So
Thank you, Microsoft.
anyway, well, I don't know. I like, as much as I love to jump on the let's slag Microsoft
Well, let's talk about
bandwagon.
your
when
Microsoft experience
I don't
last
even,
week.
Well, I don't want to talk about my Microsoft. My Microsoft experience has been
hold
the
on.
same one.
Did I miss a memo?
No, it's just that, well, my computer, it tried to update my computer again.
Oh,
It tried to force me that update that my
Doesn't
hardware
work.
my hardware doesn't like, and it just the update locks every time, and then I got to roll it back, so it kills an afternoon.
Thank you, Microsoft, for not giving us the option to opt out of updates.
Oh, don't even get me started. But no, don't stop trying to divert from your story
Okay.
because
It's all about me.
anyway, so I had to come over early and help try
Yeah.
to get this thing set up.
Well, we got it somewhat
6,
functional.
7 hours later, but
Thank you, Microsoft, for the on-screen keyboard, because that helped us out a lot.
it did. It helped us out
See?
a hell of a lot.
Throw them under the bus and then bring them back out.
Anyways, that's
That's my day so far.
that's been our Monday so far.
Yep.
Anyways, Ryan, what are we doing today?
Today we are speaking with CEO Sophie Aladas from Key2Access.
Interesting.
Really?
Now, the Key2Access, you want to give people a brief overview of... No? Nope. Need a keyboard for that.
Let's pass that one off to Steve.
No, well, we first heard about Key2Access back in the summertime when CNIB released that press release about how they were going to be working with IRA.
Yep.
And Key2Access was another company that they listed as being a new partner for them. And that's where we first heard about them. But as it turns out, they're the developer of it's both hardware and software. It's not just an app, but it's essentially it's hardware that can be placed in existing, I guess, traffic infrastructure. Into the what do you call those sort of things?
Light standards.
Right. That makes the
button almost wireless or wireless
it does
in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, it makes it so that the crossing button you don't have you can actually access those controls from an app, so that you're not sort of fumbling around and looking for the button. Or in the case of, say, people with who are in chairs, sometimes they're unable to reach those buttons. But it looks like you can also do things like even open accessible doors, like automatic doorways, without having to trip a sensor. You can actually open it with the app as well. So, and a bunch of other things from the looks of it. So it'll be interesting to talk to Sophie and sort of get the full story on how the app was developed and where they're going. And I mean, I can only imagine the nightmare that it probably is to actually get these things into the municipalities, because...
Well, they've got quite a list started anyway. And it sounds like a lot of work ongoing.
Yeah, well, for sure. Well, I can just imagine every municipality is going to be different, and they probably have different bylaws, and you're working with individual governments in all the different cities. So it's probably a lot of balls to have in the air. So be interesting to hear what she has to say.
Balls in the air.
Banter.
It's 2:25. Still no
baby shark doo 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 doo. Baby shark doo 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 doo. Gotta stop or I'll get sued.
No, by who? What song is that?
You've never heard Baby Shark?
I don't think so.
I've only heard it once.
Oh my goodness.
Is this an old song?
No, it's a new song that kind of went viral, like 2 billion views on YouTube.
Like that, kind of like the hamster dance?
Yeah,
Sort of, yeah.
It's almost as ridiculous.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
I really want to hear the hamster dance now.
Oh, hamster dance. Where have you gone?
Okay. Play the hamster dance.
Turn the gain up on 4, and then the level itself.
Oh yeah, I mean the waveform's pretty substantial. It's probably blowing out.
Hey Google, pause.
We'll listen to that later.
Hey, stop playing.
Self-destruct.
Actually, we've never tried that.
I know, right? They should.
Hey, self-destruct.
Self-destructing in 3, 2, 1.
Well, thanks, Steve.
Actually, I think I'll stick around.
Damn good. His Google engineers thought of everything.
Apparently. Segway.
Hello?
There you are. Hi, Sophie. How are you?
Hi, good and you?
Good, thank you. So, I'm Ryan. Hi. And
Hi, Ryan.
in the room with me, I have Mr. Steve Barclay.
Hello there.
Hi, Steve.
And I have Rob Minot.
Why am I always last?
You're not always last.
You do. You always introduce me last.
You're first in our mind, therefore you're last in introductions.
That's your last.
Well, let's not go that far.
Hello. In any case. So first of all, I mean, we thanks so much for joining us today and talking to us a little bit about Key2Access.
My pleasure. We're very happy to.
So maybe let's start with just telling us a little bit about the company and what you guys are doing.
Sure. So Key2Access is a Canadian startup. We originally kind of built off an idea that started off with something small. We saw a newspaper article actually of a gentleman in a wheelchair reaching out to press the pedestrian push button and literally almost falling out of his chair, and was still, a foot away from that button because it wasn't a bed of grass. And we started thinking, my co-founders and I, how is this possible? Like, what options does this gentleman have? And so that kind of was just in the back of our minds. And then one of our co-founders became friends with a gentleman that was completely blind. And we were just spitballing this stuff with him and asking him, really, from your experience, how do you navigate with infrastructure? And it was a pivotal moment for us where we decided to become a company. He explained that, at the intersection, and this is in Montreal, where we don't have a lot of audible signals, he said, I don't even waste my time looking for a button that may or may not be there, that may or may not give me an audible. So I just wait till it's silent enough and I bolt it. And we just couldn't believe that this was the condition for a lot of Canadian citizens, and most people aren't even aware. And so with modern technology, there's no reason why we can't make infrastructure work for everyone. And the way that we do that as a business is, instead of making that button a one size fit all, which will never be, we want to give every person their own button. And we do that through wireless pedestrian requesting. And the individual has either a free mobile app on their phone where they can make a call and get an audible signal if that is important to them, or through a fob. So really, they manage their experience at the intersection in a way that works for them, and we make sure that they get confirmation every step of the way of what's happening, what street is being crossed, as well as an audible countdown, and really making sure that everything that a sighted person has access to, that a visually impaired person has access to, and a mobility impaired person as well. So by not being able to reach that button, you're not able to make a call and you're not able to get across. So really just making sure that our city streets are accessible for everyone. So that's kind of the story behind our company. We're also a family business. So it's myself, my sister, and our father. So the three of us kind of combining our skill sets to get behind accessibility and try to improve our city streets.
So how long has the company actually been in existence?
So we incorporated at at the time where we had the idea. So that was in 2014. It took us a few years to refine the idea into a product. Right. And we did that really hand in hand with the community. So with different user groups, mainly Ottawa based, we looked at, what are the different challenges that you're facing today. So a little bit of an example of an evolution that we did over those few years of, from the idea to the product that we have today is with that, we simply had the fob. And it was through working with this blind gentleman, he's legally blind. He was saying, hey, look, I use my phone for everything. Can we not maybe put this on my phone so I don't have to carry something additional? So that's the kind of technological developments that we were making at the time. And I would say we were ready to go to market with a complete solution from the user's perspective in 2016. And then we started doing pilot projects across the country. We have a pilot project in Ottawa, Montreal, Brossard, and Winnipeg. And we should be having a few installations in Halifax by the end of the year. So we're very excited about that and really getting the word out about, what this technology can do, and not only how it can better service pedestrians, but also the cities who are struggling to make infrastructure more accessible. And we're really targeting many of the issues that they're facing today with APS technology and the complaints that they're getting, that a button on the pole will never solve. So we've had quite the journey to get where we are today, but we've been really happy with the steps that we've taken to ensure that what we have coming to market really suits the user's needs. And that's, an iterative process that we believe should be ongoing. So that's something that through our pilot projects and through our working with different cities and a growing user group, we want to continue to learn what is it that we can improve on, what is it that's meaningful to the community. And that's, other examples of that is simply, even the color and contrast of our fobs, things like that we really want to make sure that we continue to grow and continue to take that approach. So
could you walk us through a little bit, like sort of a bit of a case study? So somebody who's, say, visually impaired that has the app on their phone, they reach or they're approaching an intersection. How exactly does the app work for them? What are they able to do with it?
Great question. I think maybe if we take a step back just to fully understand what the experience with Key2Access is, I think
Sure.
Sometimes it's important to talk about step by step what happens without Key2Access today. So we talked a little bit about, the situation that inspired us of a gentleman in a wheelchair not being able to make contact with the button and not being able to reach it because the pole was at a bed of grass. But for a visually impaired pedestrian, the experience is a lot more cumbersome. For many reasons, not only finding and reaching the button, but there are quite a few layers of interaction with the infrastructure that as a sight person, we can sometimes take for granted. So if you picture a visually impaired pedestrian walking down the sidewalk, what's important to note is that as a visually impaired pedestrian is using the curb of the sidewalk to align themselves, as soon as they hit that dip in the curb when they're at the intersection, they're in their best possible position for alignment because they've had that follow through from the sidewalk to the dip, so they know their angle. Now, what having a button on a pole is asking us, or is asking that pedestrian to do, is veer their body from that perfect alignment, even if it's just 10 degrees to touch a button on a pole,
Right.
to have them turn back around, realign themselves and situate themselves before it's their turn to walk is an extremely cumbersome exercise. And it requires an extremely detailed sense of alignment that not everybody has. And, even if we've heard from individuals that have been blind for, over 10 years, and that still remains a struggle because the only thing that they have to situate their alignment is that curb and then the sound of traffic. So the sound of traffic is very dependent on what kind of traffic is available at that time. So just veering from that initial alignment to make your way to the button and then to make your way back is the first issue. Now, the second issue is inconsistency in the environment. So every intersection in most cities don't have one solution. It takes forever to deploy one particular product. So often a city is kind of an amalgamation of different approaches. So you could have one intersection that has no button at all. So, the cycle will change whether or not you're standing there. But because there's no button, that visually impaired individual won't get an audible. How are you going to make the audible? How are you going to request the audible without a button? So that's challenge number one. So even if you veer, make your way to the pole, find a pole, is there or is there not going to be a button there? Challenge number two, is the button going to request an audible? What are the conditions in which that call is going to ask for an audible? Is it holding the button for 3 seconds? Is it holding the button for 5 seconds? What is the confirmation that you've made a call effectively or not? So this whole kind of layer of uncertainty at the call is at the second major pain point. So, the individual gets there, they press the button, they think they've made a call, they've managed to realign themselves at the curb before it's their turn to cross, and they end up waiting there 2-3 minutes to realize, hey, I don't think I pressed it effectively, and have to do the whole exercise again. So that's issue number two. Issue number 3 is during the walk phase. So when it's your turn to walk, if you have made it to the pole, made the call effectively, requested the audible, and now you're going to get the audible, the issue remains of an audible sound traditionally in our environment today. You probably, and listeners have probably heard a kind of chirping sound or a beeping sound, or in some places in Canada, it's called the Canadian melody. It's a little bit of a kind of techno melody a little bit.
Sing it for us.
And what that delineates is north-south versus east-west. Now tell me, how many intersections are exactly north-south or exactly east-west? So we're asking people to understand which direction they need to be going in, and if that is the street that they've requested, based on a sound that delineates north-south or east-west. It's extremely difficult.
Right.
If that person isn't trained, on the intersection that they're standing at, it's almost impossible to make that crossing effectively with the button and all these different layers that we've gone through. Now, the audible is not only limiting because it simply expresses whether or not the street is north-south or east-west, but also in most municipalities, the sound completely turns off as soon as there's a countdown.
Right.
So what happens today for sighted individuals that are listening, when you see the walking man go on, you're going to hear the audible. As soon as that walking man turns into a visual countdown or the flashing red hand, which is usually halfway through the crossing,
Right.
the audible is completely cut off. So that person that is using the audible, 1, to let them know it's their turn, and 2, to help guide them through that crossing, because they use the sound on both sides to make sure they get to the other side effectively. Again, with that alignment issue, they're completely cut off. And they have no idea, is it because I have no more time left? Is it because we're at, there's a countdown going on? They have no idea, and they're in the middle of their crossing, which is the most terrifying place to be in because there's no tactile point of reference in the middle of the road. So the audible information that's communicated isn't sufficient, and the length of the audible isn't sufficient. So, from the reaching and pressing the button, understanding if you've pressed the button for the right street, if you made the call effectively, all of those issues at the button, and getting an audible response that's going to effectively get you to the other side safely are the 3 major challenges that we're addressing with Key2Access.
Right.
So now that we've kind of gone through the experience without and the experience today, let me talk to you a little bit about, and really what your question was, what the experience is with Key2Access.
Okay.
So that same individual walking down the sidewalk using, the curb to align themselves, as soon as they hit that dip in the curb, they're going to get a ping on their cell phone automatically, letting them know exactly where they are, that they've reached an intersection. So for example, name me your favorite intersection.
Steve, what's your favorite intersection here in Vancouver?
Georgia and Granville.
Georgia and Granville. Okay. So they get to that dip in the curb and they hear Georgia and Granville. Great. Not only are they getting that added piece of information confirming where they are, which even as a sighted person, sometimes it can be confusing. You get off the bus at the wrong stop. You think you're at a certain intersection, but you're not. Someone dropped you off, or there's so many different things that can happen to disorient an individual that knowing where they are is key. So Georgia and Granville, great. Second thing that they'll hear, and this is again without being prompted, it's just going to happen automatically. So they hear Georgia and Granville, and then any additional information that is key to them making a crossing safely. For example, Georgia Street is under construction. Please use Granville Crossing and alternative route of X, for example. So in this, let's say Georgia and Granville is, perfectly accessible. There's no additional messaging required. When they hear Georgia and Granville, they're going to get 2 buttons that pop up on their screen. The first one will be Georgia, and the second one will be Granville, always in the order that it was read out to you. Now, obviously the layout works using voiceover, and the buttons almost take up the entire screen. So they're 2 massive buttons that are black with white writing. and they turn red once pressed. So the contrast is quite significant, but again, they work using voiceover. So that person hasn't moved an inch, they haven't altered their alignment at all, and they have the button in their hand. They know they're at Georgia and Grandel. All they have to do is request. Let's say they request Georgia Street. So they want to cross Georgia. Once they press Georgia, it's going to tell them request for Georgia is made. So no more is there any confusion as to, did I press the right button? Did I make the call effectively? They know they've placed a call, and now they're waiting for their audible. So when it's their turn to cross, they're going to get every second of that crossing because they're ready to go as soon as it's their turn. Now, when it is their turn, two things are going to happen. They're going to get the traditional audible signal coming from the infrastructure as we're used to it today, and that's for two reasons. One is because we do believe it serves a secondary purpose of warning the environment that someone that's crossing needs this sound. And two, this is how the visually impaired community is trained today in order to make the crossing. So they're going to hear that audible signal, but their phone is also going to vibrate and tell them crossing Georgia. So what's very powerful about that kind of secondary confirmation is if both crossings were requested at the same time, and that individual doesn't know that someone else requested an audible for the other side, it can be very confusing with ambient noise and everything going on in our cities today to figure out, is that call for me? And, you know, do I go as this and make out the difference in between both sounds? So now when the audible goes off and you get the vibration in your hand, you know that that audible is for the call that you've made. Now, we get the traditional audible during the walk phase, but we've also added a audible countdown for during the flash don't walk, the flashing hand, or the visual countdown. We want to make sure that that information is also accessible to a visually impaired individual. So everything that a sighted person gets, a visually impaired individual gets. So they get the sound the entire way through the crossing, and they're able to use that sound to make it to the other side. So that's the experience at an intersection with Key2Access. Now, there's a few other things that maybe I should mention that are interesting about the technology when it comes to accessibility is we have three ways of making the call. So it may not be relevant in Vancouver because you guys don't get that much snow, but I know for other Canadian cities, it's a big deal. So, you know, our pilot project in Winnipeg, and actually this is where we got the idea. Someone told us, oh, in the winter months, I don't really want to take my phone out and take off my glove to press my phone. So we've also added the up volume and down volume button as a way to make a call. So when you hear Georgia and Grandel, Georgia will be the up volume button and Grandel will be the down volume button. Now, another thing that we've added as well as a third way to make a call is voice command. So you can simply ask your phone, cross Georgia Street, which is another layer of accessibility that has never been put in place before. Imagine, you know, you're not only maybe visually impaired, but you have an extreme mobility impairment. So either paralysis or something that would not allow you to physically make a request. So this is opening the door to a lot of people that wouldn't have had access in the past. So we're really trying to think of every single type of individual, and not only, you know, because oftentimes what we see is when we talk about the visually and mobility impaired community, people picture either someone with a white cane or someone in a wheelchair. But what we want to educate is there's such a range of individuals that may not at first glance seem like they need a different type of response, but they do. I mean, if you have, let's say, Parkinson's, just even something that might impact your reach, or you've broken your leg and you're on crutches and it's difficult for you to make your way to that button. Really, you know, if we want to solve this, we have to think about every type of individual, and that's what we tried to do with those three types of requesting. Another thing that's interesting is cities today get an enormous amount of complaints, which is really sad to talk about, actually, about the audible signals. So, you know, residents, local businesses, are very bothered by this reoccurring audible sound that oftentimes is going on and there's nobody there that actually needs it. So these people are, bothered by this noise pollution. So the city turns down the volume at the intersections. But then a visually impaired person gets there and they're trying to use it and it's not meaningful to them because they can't hear it anymore. So then nobody's happy.
Right.
So what we're able to do with the mobile app is when you download it, you select which type of profile you are, depending on what response you want from the infrastructure. So if you're someone that simply has a mobility impairment and you can't make contact with that button, you don't need the audible to get across. You simply just need that button in your hand. So by selecting the mobility impaired profile, you won't have the audible. But if you select visually impaired and you want that audible, we're going to make sure you get it at every intersection where you need it and that it is meaningfully loud. So we're able to tell the city, hey, let's make this louder for those who need it and ensure that it is actually useful for them, but also eliminate all the other times that it's not required.
Right.
And give you a data log of every time it's been called and, really show that this was a visually impaired individual crossing so that when you do get a complaint, you can easily say, ma'am, at 11:25, there was a visually impaired individual crossing and that's why you heard it. So also re-educating the population as to what that audible does and how important it is, we think is really key as well. So that's kind of from start to finish, everything that the user would get with Key2Access.
Can we break down sort of the components of Key2Access for a minute? Obviously, the app is the front end, is the user experience. Tell us a little bit about the back end, though, and the actual hardware that's involved and what the process is for, say, a municipality to bring this into their existing traffic infrastructure.
Sure. So as you mentioned, the mobile app is the user interface. There's that as well as the fob, depending on what the individual prefers. Both of those connect using Bluetooth to what we call the K2A receiver. It's basically kind of the size of, I would say, a little bit more than half of a VHS. It's a little black box.
Right.
And that gets plugged directly into the pedestrian signal head, which is the box at the intersection that has the walking man and the flashing hand.
Right.
It goes directly in there and plugs into their existing power source, plugs into, depending on which type of intersection they have, what configuration they have, directly into their intersection system. So if they have an APS already, which is an accessible pedestrian signal button, so the kind of fancier push buttons,
right,
that have an audible, we'll plug in directly to that. If they have just a regular button that has no audible, we'll also plug into that and we'll provide them with a speaker. If they have no button at all, so what that usually means is that the intersection is on a cycle.
Right.
So it'll just change no matter what. If there's no car or no person standing there, it'll alternate based on some statistical analysis that they have of the intersection. We plug into that, also add a speaker, and what that does is for that intersection would never be made accessible because there's no button or audible. When the user makes the call at that intersection, so from their perspective, it's the exact same interface. Let's say Georgia and Randall was a cycling intersection.
Right.
They get there, they're still going to see their two buttons, and they're basically going to be requesting for an audible. So what our box does is it reads when, let's say they requested Georgia, it's going to read when Georgia is on next and play that audible for them. So we really complement any type of intersection design. That was really key for us when developing something for the user. We wanted to make sure that this was something that they can use in the same way everywhere.
Right.
Because it's so difficult to learn all these different types of intersection designs. The poles are in different places. Even just having something by request or that's going to cycle. That inconsistency we wanted to eliminate from the user's perspective. Now, from the city's perspective, it's important. I mean, they have those intersections designed that way for vehicles for a reason. It helps the flow for the city and all of that. So we wanted to make sure that we were providing them a product that allowed them to keep their intersections configured in a way that was appropriate for their city design, but also gave the user a meaningful way to cross the street. So that little black box for a, let's say, traditional 4-way crossing intersection, you would need 4 black boxes, so 1 per corner. They support both crossings. So in the way that you would have at one pole 2 buttons, right? One going Georgia and one going Grandel. 1 black box can support both of those intersections, both of those crossings. So 4 black boxes per intersection. What the city also gets with this, and we talked a little bit about it, is that data. So understanding, the movement of their pedestrians, what areas are especially important for this community. So when they're spending additional accessibility monies in, let's say, ramps or other projects that they have going on, they're able to deploy that money in an area that is more meaningful to the population, which they've never had that data before. So we're able to, with that, kind of really answer the needs that the city has. Another one we talked about was the complaints on audibles. So with that black box, we're really trying to answer kind of their issues as well, in an easy, plug-in way that is also agnostic really to whatever button provider they have or system design they have. So from the city perspective, it's a very easy add-on that really just elevates their service to their citizens.
How do you go about marketing this? How do cities find out about your product?
Yeah, so that's my everyday challenge. Cities are an interesting landscape to be doing business in. The main thing I think that's important for us, so we have an official partnership with the CNIB as the pedestrian, the accessible pedestrian system that they're officially recommending to cities. So what we like to do, and we think it's even just beneficial for any project that the city would have with us, is bring them to the table. So they often have their contacts within the city, and we sit down, the 3 of us, and discuss, what are the issues, the local issues that CNIB clients are having, how the city feels about, their current accessible system, and where they see that it can be improved, and us. So that's a good point of entry for us, because we feel it really is meaningful to have that initial conversation be client-based and with the local perspective. That's one thing. A second interesting point of entry, in the era of smart city design and innovation and entrepreneurship, a lot of cities have come to know us through different startup communities. So, for example, in Montreal, we did the City of Montreal official incubator. So that allowed them to get to know us, because that is the biggest challenge for a small startup selling to the public sector. So whether it's municipality or the federal government, it's very difficult to exist in a world where sales cycles are extremely long and complex. These types of, entrepreneurship type venues are catered to our type of business construct. So that has been another interesting point of entry. And a lot of what we do is really going and meeting with the city in person and giving them a demo is really meaningful. And then as well as, all the traditional stuff when it comes to, tech fairs and industry, everything to do with traffic type conferences and all of that, we're as present as possible in all the, relevant spaces. And the more they see us in these different types of environments, the more they start asking questions, and you never know where a lead can come from. So we try to get out there as much as possible.
Well, you've hit the big time now. You're on the AT Banter podcast. So clearly get ready tomorrow. Your phones are going to be ringing off the hook.
There you go. There you go.
We call it the AT Banter bump.
Is that what we call it?
No, what we
Is that
do
what
now.
this? Are you talking about my paunch again? That's what I call my AT Banter bump.
No, that's the AT Banter baby bump.
But given that the partnership with the CNIB must have really helped you guys out. I mean, because that's seems to be to me a perfect fit for you guys.
Definitely. And not only from, the actual integrity of our product and making sure that it works with their clients, but also, I mean, it's an amazing organization. They're one of the only, non-for-profits that are alive and well across the country. They service their clients not only in, rehab, but just in lifestyle, in life skills, community events. Like, they do amazing work, and I think they really bring also an interesting collaborative kind of perspective. So they've partnered with a few other companies that are really interesting in this space, that are really promoting the visually impaired clients to be more mobile friendly, or getting them on smartphones and showing them, all the possibilities that technology can bring to their lives. So a few other companies that they have now partnered with is Blind Square and Ira. Right. Super interesting technologies. And for us, what we really see is something that's kind of very beneficial for our clients, as well as those other businesses' clients, is this idea of we're a network of solutions that a CNIB client can go to the CNIB and be trained on, these 3 different types of products that cohesively go together. So it's not burdensome on them to have to, learn, and okay, this place there's this company, and this place there's this company. So there's kind of this cohesive approach that I think is really amazing, and for a non-for-profit to be doing, really thinking outside the box, and not just doing rehab, but strategically thinking, how can we better help our clients, and doing that through something that is more innovative and forward thinking, and partnering with industry, I think is amazing. And we've only had, the best experience working from them. And what's super interesting is now we've traveled across the country. We actually just came back from BC over the weekend. So pardon?
You picked a great weekend to come here. It was beautiful this weekend.
Oh my God, it was beautiful. It didn't rain at all. We went to Victoria too. It was amazing.
Yeah, you picked the right month. Next month won't be nearly as fun.
Yeah, well, next month in Montreal is definitely not going to be fun. So. And going across the country also to meet with their local staff has been really an experience. And what's particularly, I would say, unique and fascinating about their organization is they have a corporate culture, across the nation. You go to any CNIB office and you feel that it's the same, and you get the same, energy and enthusiasm, and they're a powerhouse, and we're so happy to be working with them.
Let me ask you a little bit about the working with all the different cities and municipalities, because it seems to me that must be a real challenge, because anytime you're stepping into local bureaucracy and politics, do all the different cities and municipalities work differently? Like, is it kind of a challenge? Like, it's sort of like a new challenge every time you sit down and meet with a different one, or do they all pretty much work the same?
I would say...
Sounds like a loaded question.
Yes. And I would say yes to both of your comments. how I would describe it is you kind of have reoccurring themes, but every city is definitely unique, and they have their, issues that are meaningful to them that may not be meaningful to other cities. So you really have to get to know that city, get to know, their community, get to know their local CNIB office and their clients, because the angle that is most meaningful to them, and even just through describing our product, we do so many things. Some things are more meaningful to some communities versus other things are more meaningful to other communities. For example, in Montreal, a big thing is, so they don't have many audible signals. And when people press the button to get the audible, they get added time. So it recognizes that individual needs or will likely need more time. But what ends up happening is the general public is pressing the button for too long and they're getting extended time. And that's kind of messing up all of the city planning with, backing up traffic and things like that. So that's an interesting angle for Montreal, is saying, okay, you're able to target what user actually does need this extended time. That's meaningful to us. Other municipalities in Winnipeg, for example, they have audibles on all the time, every crosswalk, every direction, all the time, 24 hours. And that came out of a human rights complaint. And the individual won, saying, I don't understand why a sighted person can have access no matter what type of button and all of that. So their solution was, okay, let's just put audibles everywhere. Now what's happening with that is, realistically, you can't have audibles blaring at 2 a.m. in a residential area, so the volume is significantly lower.
Right.
Now, again, we're getting into the situation of nobody's happy. So each city has their own, their own perspective and their own reality. So that's really important for us to get to know the city, get to know how we can service their unique needs. Now, what I would say to your, are they all the same or are they all different? So yes, they're all different, but yes, they're all the same in a way. So you kind of have different categories, I would say. There's small cities and big cities. So big cities really behave similarly and small cities behave similarly. Big cities, there's just more process. There's more people.
Sure.
There's more checkpoints to go through, more approval processes, more committees, more decision making. Smaller cities have less of that. And sometimes, from our experience, we've found are more agile to try new things and to get things through their process quickly.
Right.
But I mean, it's just logical, right?
Sure.
A bigger city, more people involved, that's just what it is. So you do see, certain things reoccurring based on size, and then other conversations really based around different themes, I would say.
So from a hardware or a technology point of view, though, they're all running like all those light standards. It's all running the same technology in the back end, is it not, or is it different from city to city?
So it's a little bit different from city to city, but it'll vary in maybe 5 different ways. So, based on intersection design. So we talked about, and there's some technical terms. If an intersection is on recall, so where it cycles and changes, just the flow of that particular intersection, whether it's request for an audible or request for a walk. Like if you don't press that button, that walking man will never come on for you. So there's different intersection designs. There's different built infrastructure. So there's a few different APS providers that could or could not be already installed. So basically different buttons. There's different philosophies on how those buttons connect to a controller and how independent the button can be. So each city has their own engineering philosophy, but ultimately from a citizen's perspective, there are only kind of I would say 5 different ways that you can interact with an intersection differently.
Right.
But I mean, generally speaking, there's only a few ways that they can be different, and they all have, similarities when it comes to it. But overall city design, we're also speaking, how old the city is, how old their infrastructure is, how quickly they have or have not ramped up new technologies. So how many different technologies do they have within their city can sometimes make them different. Some cities are really fast with deployment. So in Ontario, for example, the AODA mandated that. So the AODA is the Accessibility for Ontarians Disabilities Act, I believe.
Right.
And they've mandated that every intersection in Ontario be retrofitted with an APS. So taking that traditional button that doesn't, have an audible or may not have an audible, and changing it to this kind of fancier button that also vibrates and all of this stuff. So, that does still have its limitations for all the reasons that we mentioned, but is definitely a step in the right direction from having nothing at all or just a traditional button. So with that being said, Ontario has done a really great job at ramping up their deployment of APSs, so have a little bit more of a consistent landscape, I would say.
Right.
So they are different, but the same.
Right. Well, and I mean, that landscape could be changing, in the coming years, because I mean, really, we need something on a federal level that's like the ADA. The fact that there isn't anything like that yet, and I know they're working on it. But hopefully in the next 5 years, we could see that spread through the entire country. In which case, you guys are poised in a really great spot, I think, because especially from a city point of view. Well, especially from there's the user point of view where it's the usability, and I think that the fact that the benefit of being able to access that button wirelessly, as well as getting that navigation information, I see that being a really powerful for the end user. Also on the city level, though, you've also got this data that I would think would be really sort of important for them too, because then they can see which of these intersections are being accessed by people who are visually impaired or people who are using the app. And from a city planning point of view, I could see that being really powerful as well. So, I mean, it sounds like it's really an amazing product.
Thank you. And I agree with you. I think it's going to definitely help on so many levels. If, nationally we can get behind a particular approach, and it's obviously not a particular product, but a particular philosophy, I think would be really beneficial. I mean, nobody spends their entire life in one city anymore. People travel, tourism is on the rise. Canadian cities are super fascinating to visit and are increasingly easier to get to. So when you're, in Montreal and then you want to go to Vancouver and you have a completely different environment, it's just not pleasant for that individual tourist, and can definitely be avoided if we can just all kind of get together and come up with a consistent approach.
One more thing before we let you go. A lot of assistive technology these days, people are finding there are also a lot of sort of mainstream applications of it as well. And I think you sort of touched on this earlier, but could you talk to us a little bit about what kind of sort of mainstream scenarios that Key2Access could help with as well?
Definitely. So on top of just a few things when it comes to our product offering and other situations where it can be applicable, what we do want to create even beyond the intersection is just a general access to the city. So an example of that is, let's say you're walking down Georgia and you hit Grandel, great. It's a signalized intersection. You pull out your Key2Access app, you make the crossing, perfect. But the next intersection you hit on Georgia is a stop sign intersection. if you're not trained on that intersection, how are you supposed to know that this is a stop sign and not, a traffic light? You just have to start searching for a pole or wait to hear if there's enough traffic to kind of give you an inkling that it's stop and go. So that's another example of where we layer on Key2Access with virtual beacons and specify to the individual trying to make that crossing what type of intersection they're standing at. So with Georgia and Grandel, by getting the buttons, they know that this is a signalized intersection. When they get to the next intersection on Georgia, their app will tell them, Georgia and X, for example, this is a 4-way stop sign. Please navigate accordingly. So they know what part of their orientation and mobility training to activate and understand what to do at that crossing. So same thing with T intersections. If the intersection on the other side of the T, the crossing is over a little bit, sometimes they don't line up perfectly, describing that. So really, beyond the intersection, giving people at every crossing engagement. So we're not, a wayfinding app or any of that, but where critical information is required or you need infrastructure to behave a certain way or give you a cue or do something, that's where we come into play. And then also another application of that is doors. So being able to open a door. We all see those accessible plates there that are sometimes positioned beside the door, but they're often not positioned in the appropriate place. And that's simply because of the door frame design. It's limited to certain areas where they can physically put that plate. Sometimes you have, picture you're in a wheelchair, you're rolling up to that button, you're pressing the button, and then the door is swinging out towards you. So you have to back up and then somehow get through it before it closes. And there's double door situations. And then also for the visually impaired community, it doesn't tell you that the door is open.
Right.
So, all of that, we have a similar approach using the Key2Access app. Same app, when you get to a door, a button will appear and will ask you if you want to open the door. So that's kind of answering the question by saying these are all the other things that our technology can do. Now for the universal, I guess, how we're addressing more than just the visually and mobility impaired community, because we really do feel that any step to improve accessibility improves everybody's environment.
Absolutely.
So we've heard from cyclists that have told us, this is great. I'll get a fob, I'll clip it onto my bike, and then I don't have to get off my bike, get to a pole. Mothers with strollers told us, at different tech fairs, this is great. Like, when I have my kids and I'm holding one kid's hand, I'm pushing the stroller, and then I don't want to let go of them to press this button, I can just have that strapped onto my stroller or take out my phone. Different people, the most surprising one to me was individuals have told us, yeah, I never touch those pools. They're so dirty, so sanitary. So, really, and this is, I think, I know as founders, our shared belief, any step to improve accessibility and make, our cities designed with accessibility in mind improves the condition for everyone. Yeah. So, that's just to name a few, and there's probably going to be a lot more different examples that we get as these become increasingly deployed. But, I don't see why we can't take this as an opportunity to discover all those different types of ways that accessibility can improve, the lived environment for everyone. And I think, all of the improvements that we're making, even when you're talking about ramps and having things be more with visual contrast, I mean, that can help everyone. And even for me, having something on my phone that's convenient in my pocket, I would even use. So I don't know if that's kind of the type of question that you were asking.
No, absolutely. That's exactly.
Okay, great.
Oh, one other real quick technical question. What's the range on them?
So it's customizable. So when the city installs the receiver,
Okay.
they cap the range at what's appropriate for that intersection.
Great.
So depending on how far the pole is from the curb, the idea is in our installation guide, we ask them to cap the range at the curb. So you want the individual to be, in their best position when they make the call.
So for people out there that are listening to this and think this is an amazing idea and they want it in their city, what can they do?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because we really do see the power of engaging with the community and the request kind of coming from the locals. So if it's something that interests you, if you have any questions, by all means, please contact us. You can contact me personally at Sophie, Sophie .Aladas, ALADAS at Key2Access.com. So the 2 is a number 2, or visit us on our website and we'd be happy to answer any of your questions. Now, if you want to reach out directly to your municipality, we definitely encourage you to do so. It's always meaningful for them to hear directly from their residents, if that's through your local representative, or if you have any contacts in your accessibility committee, or even sending a message to your traffic department is also another interesting avenue. So any way that you can reach out to your city representatives, and based on your individual contacts as well. But if you ever want to reach out to us, we're here for that, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
So sorry, what's the web address?
Oh yes, sorry, it's Key2Access.com. Listen,
thanks so much for joining us and chatting with us. Let's have you on again down the road, maybe once we get a little bit more traction and see how things are going.
Yeah, we'll hear about how you've become super wealthy by outfitting all the Canadian cities and have expanded internationally, and
we'll for sure reach out to you guys if we get a pilot project going in Vancouver or anywhere in BC. I think it would be really great to share those locations with your listeners.
Please do.
It's been super fun, and I'm also very proud of us. We made it an hour on the dot, so
that's right.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks,
Sophie. Take care. That is super cool.
That's a lot of data points when you think about buildings and doors. You think hospitals and dental offices, like all these points of entry, right? If you're looking at buildings, not just traffic signals.
If you're looking at doors, I mean, sure. I mean, yeah. I mean, that's a whole other world there.
Mm-hmm.
But really, I mean, the intersection data alone for a city would be incredibly useful. Like, I don't know what kind of access to data they have in terms of those signals. Like, do you think that it tracks every time that button's pushed?
The ones that have cameras probably do.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't really know how that works, but I mean, talk about an easy way to get some demographic, some traffic demographics.
Yeah.
It's incredibly valuable, I would think. So to, on a city level. So, just that alone, and then you put on top of that the navigational data, being able to approach an intersection and know exactly what intersection you're at.
Well, what type of intersection? Like she was saying, you don't know if the one you've just approached has a stop sign. Maybe it's not a controlled intersection, right? Maybe there's no traffic signals. Well, you don't know.
Yeah, and I mean that's the whole point of O&M instruction is that you learn a route, and you have to do that because you don't have access to that. You don't know what intersection you're at unless you know the route. As somebody who's visually impaired. So
GPS systems can give you some of that data, but when she starts talking about, what if it's offset a little bit, or what if there's an island in the middle of the road, those things, they don't show up as part of GPS instruction. So it's an incredibly important information to relay as well.
So awesome. Yeah, it's just an awesome idea. So
yeah, it's very well thought out.
Again, I'd encourage anybody who's listening, contact your municipality, tell them about them, and let's see if we can, get them in more and more Canadian cities. Or heck, you know what? For that matter, I don't even know. We didn't ask her if they're restricted to Canadian cities or not. So if you're one of our American listeners,
reach out to them anyway.
Reach out to them anyways, because you never know. This is it's a great idea. I wish I would have thought of it. I could be sitting in Tahiti right now.
Yeah, you're still thinking about your hot chocolate hot tub, aren't you?
Yeah. I have all kinds of ideas on a Saturday night at 11:30.
All right, Coco, time to wrap it up.
All right.
Tiny bubbles.
Hey, Ryan.
Rob.
Where can people find us?
They can find us online at atbanter.com.
They can also drop us an email if they so desire, atbanterpodcast@gmail.com.
And rumor has it that there is still an AT Banter presence at Facebook and Twitter.
AT Banter and AT_Banter, respectively.
And Instagram. Don't forget Instagram.
Yeah, and an Instagram, too. Hey, Steve.
Hey, Coco.
Where can people find Canadian assistive technology?
Well, they can find me at www.canasstech.com. That's CANASSTECH.com.
And what about Chaos Technical Services?
Chaos Technical Services, that schmuck named Rick, who's off on vacation right now.
Yeah, he's in Africa.
Lucky bum. He can be found at Chaos Tech at shaw.ca.
Wait. Oh, sorry. You're giving the email address?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I stepped on that. Go ahead.
Oh, boy. Yeah. So Rick can be found by email at chaostech@shaw.ca. His website is www.chaostechnicalservices.com.
Mm-hmm. That's it. That's right.
Isn't it just?
Mm-hmm.
How about that?
Anything else, fellas?
You know what I heard?
What?
What'd you hear?
Heard Winamp is back for Windows 10.
Really?
Winamp is a new app for Windows 10.
Really?
kidding.
Does it still whip the llama's ass?
I don't know. I haven't checked it out yet. I had to format my computer.
How can it possibly...
It's back.
Possibly compete with Groove?
That's probably why it's back.
Yeah, probably.
That's right. Oh, dear. Well, don't even get us started on Microsoft.
That's right.
Today.
I got to get my keyboard fixed before you go. So let's go. Wrap it
All
up.
right. Okay. All right. No pressure. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for listening once again. And
We'll see you next time.
we'll see you next time.
Get out quick, get out. This podcast has been brought to you by Canadian Assistive Technology, providing low vision and blindness solutions across Canada. Find us online at www.canasstech.com. That's CANASSTECH.com. Or call us toll free at 1-844-795-8324. For all your assistive technology servicing needs, call Chaos Technical Services at 778-847-6840 or find them online at chaostechnicalservices.com. Music provided by bensound.com.
Whoa, look at that. Master of the one take.